So, hello everyone. Let me quickly share my screen. And thank you so much for choosing this room. I hope you find something interesting today and something useful. So my name is Xenia and I'm with Zero Waste Washington. Today I will quickly tell you about our effort to define impact of reuse in Washington State. And just a very quick background, Zero Waste Washington is a statewide nonprofit. We are mainly a policy shop. We help pass various laws on the state level and local levels, but we also conduct research and run various community-based projects. Just 2 years ago, we stumbled upon an amazing resource provided by Reuse Minnesota. They pretty comprehensively looked into environmental, social, and economic impacts of their reuse sector in Minnesota. Just 2 years later, right now, or a bit early next year, they will produce an improved version of that paper. They will build upon it and will make it replicable so that others also can use it as a base. We started looking at various similar efforts across the nation, just trying to understand what else has been done in that matter. And we met an amazing team from University of Maine, who've spent 5 years interviewing 600 households and businesses and entities and experts to identify social impacts of reuse sector in Maine. And all of that empowered Zero Waste Washington to start building a draft of impacts of reuse industry in Washington State. And today we'll quickly take you through our methodology, very on the surface, and we'll share very preliminary results of some of the sections. The reason and the goal of the paper that we are producing at the moment is to qualify and quantify positive impacts of reuse sector in Washington. We're also trying to build the base for those entities and businesses to tell a story about the impact. We will also initiate work on identifying gaps and needs and barriers for this industry to grow strong and healthy. We also want to provide, we also want to create a document that will be able to replicate in the future when new numbers are available, when new tools are available, but also we'll be able to replicate it for other sectors and other states and make it compatible so that maybe at some point we have that data available nationwide. The scope of our research is, as I mentioned, reuse. But when we look into reuse, we are looking into businesses and entities that extend the life of resources and decrease the demand for new production. And under that fall 3 different business activities or nonprofit activities: repair, resale, resale of used goods, and a rental. Our report will look into 3 domains. We'll look into 3 different impacts. We'll quantify economic and environmental impact, and we'll qualify social impact. For us to quantify anything, we need data, and we need to use financial-based modeling approach to quantify anything. And first, we need data. We looked into various sources. We collected information about businesses, business licenses from different sources, and the main data source for us was Dun & Bradstreet Corporation. It's the most reputable on the market. They've been around forever. And the way we get data from them, it's we have the name of a business, of an entity, the industry, I'll touch on it in a second, numbers for their sales, and the number of employees that they employ. On the industry, so each business has their activity listed in a particular code. It's called the NAICS code. If you're not familiar with it, it stands for North American Industry Classification System. So each business has the primary industry and the secondary industry, and that's how we know what they do, and we're able to identify those businesses. But also, when we got the data, we realized that some of the sectors or some of the businesses they do not get their full revenue from those reuse activities. Some of the activities are selling absolutely new goods. So we had to dissect the data and categories and estimate what a particular type of business or a particular code, a particular subsector has reuse and what percentage. For example, we have a bridal shop and only 20% of their revenue comes from repair and sale of used bridal dresses, but the rest of the revenue comes from selling new dresses. So we will say that that sector has only 20% of reuse revenue. Also, quantifying economic impacts, we need to acknowledge that when we spend on reuse, we actually displacing by new. So for the economy, it also means something. So while doing our calculations, we have to account for that as well. That is the highlight of those different subsectors of repair, resale, and rental. And each of them has those NAICS codes, and each of them also, like some of the businesses, has, as I mentioned, multiple business activities. When we got data, we figured out that we have about 15,000 businesses that fall under reuse sector scope. If you see on the very left, the three major are purely reuse, repair, rental, and resale. Other might have a mix of those activities, reuse and not. And as I mentioned, we did account for that, but that's kind of the overview of the sector. On the economic impacts, as I mentioned, we needed to account for all those different weightings, but that helped us bring numbers together after we apply those weightings and define the revenue generated by reuse sector in Washington state, and we'll be able to also dissect it by county. Also, using another model, we'll be able to put numbers together and see how much social value added the sector provides. Taxes paid, wages, profits to shareholders, and so on. Also, we'll be able to identify the number of jobs created by the sector. And well, easier for us and luckily for us, reuse jobs are mostly local jobs. All the repair jobs, resale, and rental, they're all local jobs. So it will be easier to assess. When we looked into environmental impacts, first, we need to research all available life cycle analysis tools and various tools available on the market. There are not that many, and unfortunately, none of them are specifically designed to estimate reuse impacts. But we stopped with the tool developed by EPA, and it's called US environmentally extended input-output model. And what it does, it basically converts dollars into greenhouse gas emissions and water withdrawals for the production of this good. For example, if we buy a t-shirt for $20, when we input those $20 in the system, in the model, it will tell us how much greenhouse gas emissions been associated with production of these t-shirts, and also for the water withdrawals for that particular $20 per t-shirt. And because we're looking into the reuse sector, we basically have to apply weightings and quantify avoided impacts. So when we are buying for like $20 of used goods, with application of some weights, we'll be able to quantify the environmental impacts this way. So it's not straightforward, it's a limitation, but on the very far right, you see our meeting with the person who developed this tool, Wes Ingerson from EPA, and our colleagues from Reuse Minnesota, all together in the room trying to work out for the need to estimate environmental impacts of reuse sector. Then I'll quickly go over social impacts. For that effort, we sent out requests to hundreds of businesses and entities to conduct a interview and submit the responses to the surveys. We had 43 responses, which is actually an industry-wise, it's pretty good. And as you see, the majority of them were repair businesses. 91% of them were micro businesses, majority one-off shops, and also they provided more than one type of service or sold more than one. For example, it would be a repair and selling of used items. Also, 31% of them were minority and women owned. 20 of them employed folks from underserved populations. 56% of them provided on-the-job technical skill training, 25 offered volunteer opportunities. They did a lot in the community building, 56 donated monetary and other resources, values in their communities. And they also, 34% of them collaborating and partnering with their folks in their communities. With the help of this questioning and questionnaires and interviews, we are also trying to identify motivators and barriers for this industry to grow strong. We asked businesses why they think their customers coming back. We found that 52% said that folks are trying to extend the life of something of value, whether it repair it, something that they possess, or buying something of value, but it's used to extend this value. And among the challenges, we found that supply chain disruptions is the case in 56% of responders. And 43 said that lack of technically skilled workers is a big issue. And as you are aware, since you're in this industry, that repair skill is unfortunately at the moment is a dying skill, but we're in this room trying to do something with it. Thank you so much. I'll be open for questions after my colleague Amanda will do her part.
Excellent. Thanks, Xenia. I have questions for you, but we can talk later too. Let me make sure I can do this. I was trying to keep an eye on some other things. So let's see. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
All right. Now what if I try to do it this way? Oh, it wants to try to. How is that?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay, great. All right. So thank you guys for joining me today. Oh, I tried to do too many things and I don't know where. Hold on.
It's not full screen though.
Yeah, I noticed that. How come? Let me see. This is what happens when you work between too many different platforms. Right here. Let's try to go back. Well, we'll just have to see what we get. Anywho, well, how's that? There we go. That's cool. Excellent. Thank you guys. My name is Amanda Miller. I am the executive director of the South King Tool Library. I use she, her pronouns. I am in my crazy house, and I hope my kids don't come home in the middle of this, but if you do, if you hear chaos, you know that is what's happening most likely. We are down here in Federal Way, Washington, South King County. We are in the same county as Seattle. We're a little different, just as I am. We serve folks of the South King region, North Pierce, indiscriminately, wherever you're from. If you're on vacation and you need to borrow stuff, we don't care. You just come on in and borrow things. We provide access to tools, information, and resources to South King, North Pierce residents. And we strive for barrierless access pathways. So that's where a lot of my work is centered, and trying to provide these services for free. And we adapt our programs to the needs of our community. So we're a passionate community-based organization and nonprofit, which in and of itself is a business, and we run into quagmires all the time with those things, but we have had the advantage to leverage grant funding with the donate the value you find and can equitably afford. So we are a free model, and we highlight that that we do not require an annual membership due for the tool library. That said, we also have quite a lot of other things that we do. One thing that here we go, had on my mind as I was putting this together was this quote from Carl Sagan. And if you wish to make an apple pie from scratch, you must first invent the universe. And that comes to mind when we try to center ourselves and think about the kind of programs that help our community, why we do what we do, of course, and then also how we can approach it in an original way. A lot of terms that we use throughout this community, cafe, library, clinic, swap, have different associations to them. So a lot of the time we end up clarifying what exactly we mean by those things. If we are environmentally focused or grassroots or community-centered organizations, these are key elements that really aren't conveyed to folks immediately when they hear a tool library or when they find out certain programs that we have. So we have relied on telling folks directly what those things are, and explaining the association sometimes takes a moment. So
yeah, Amanda, that the slides are not advancing if that's intentional.
Nope, I'm on the pie slide still. We'll move on in just a second. Yeah, I just wanted to go over real quick a little bit of our background and our ethos, and like how our organization conveys a lot of these stories through the data. So we're reliant on some of the data points, some of the sort of things people could take away or in a snapshot based on this data that I'm going to share with you and the way that we get it. So here are the 6 kinds of programs with the intermittent, spiritual guidance not really in here, or more or less like philosophical worldview that we end up discussing with people as they come in. But we do checkouts, quantify inventory additions, we do swaps, recycling events, repair cafes, and workshops and classes. So these are sort of the categories that we end up calculating most of the metrics from, and that we've found are a need in our community.
Slides not advancing, Amanda, sorry.
Oh, are we on the project feedback?
No, we're still on the
Been
title
on slide 2 the whole time.
Oh. Well, the pie slide's really good. Hold on, let's see. What's this? Can you still see it?
Still the same. Mm-hmm.
I'm not rating Canva very
Yeah,
good.
you've just moved.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you do it like you are right now, that will work. You're just gonna have to do it manually.
Yeah, we're looking at your 4th slide right now.
Okay. Well, you'll have to just grin and bear it here. Thanks, guys. All right, so here are little categories that we were talking about data, and then here are our data points that we collect information on to convey our message. Thanks, guys. Sorry, bear with me. So the first one is the project feedback surveys. We don't actively pursue a lot of these. This is a passive way that we ask folks to engage with us, but every checkout and the transactional receipt actually gets one of these to give us feedback, and we get to glean a lot of information from these. So we get to know how many tools that they borrowed, why did they borrow them instead of buy them, and what kind of projects they're working on, to help guide us in why people are borrowing the certain things that they have. And this is just a really common response with the cost versus frequency of use and the space to store on a permanent basis, which is what we assume as we're starting to libraries, that this is going to be the need. What I always find interesting is the one-off of, I had one of these and it broke, or I didn't know I needed this kind of tool and I didn't want to have to go buy the wrong tool. So those are really enlightening ways to glean that information. The next one is tonnage. So this is kind of the industry standard that I was introduced to for tool libraries and repair functions were focusing on the weights of items, but there was hardly actually much weighing going on. I think a lot of it was assumed. And then when we incorporated things like recycling events, it was easier. The vendors do weigh those things. So we get a lot of information from the vendors that are able to do that. We also do weigh items ourselves. So we've gone through and actually weighed every item that I have in inventory. Ket, our program manager, is probably hiding over here and shaking their head and saying, yes, we did. And then we have also been able to hold swaps. So like our clothing swap, I think this was our 5th swap for clothing, and that was in November of this year. We weighed everyone's bag as they came and as they were leaving their shopping experience, and calculated both the weight of the bag, but the embodied carbon, which was really cool to see what kind of trip they could have taken. So I'll explain a little bit more about that in a moment, but we have diverted just in that day over 1,700 pounds of textiles, and then another 2,100 pounds went to a Northwest Center for their job training facility that they do resale and give those clothes away. And then this was another metric that we utilize. This is some older data from last year, I believe, or maybe even the year before. I just grabbed kind of an example to give you. We do assign a value dollar-wise to just about everything we do. This is, as the folks were talking in the last couple sessions about the rural experience, and I was trying to think of the differences between the urban and rural. This is a great way for people to actually change what they are consuming, is to see the dollar value that they're saving by recycling and making other choices besides purchasing new. So this is a nice way to do that. And one of the last ones, it's not the last thing actually, was embodied carbon. This is something that I'm really excited to be able to share with you guys. Been having a lot of conversations about this for the past, I don't know, couple of years, and our brothers and sisters over in Edinburgh, Scotland were way on the ball about this in 2020, started to dive in. They use several resources available to them. I have those links on the next slide if you guys are interested. I can definitely copy and paste these as well, but this is an amazing tool that we can use to calculate the embodied carbon for the actually quite a few things. So embodied carbon is the idea that you are, everything that is produced creates a carbon factor. If it's not specifically carbon, there are also other mined minerals and things, environmental effects that go into it. So embodied carbon is kind of a general term, but by borrowing instead of buying, you get to avoid that embodied carbon. The same would go for the swaps. So as people were leaving the clothing swaps, we were weighing the bags to see how much they weighed, because there is a factor, I think it's like 7.8 for every pound of clothing, 7.8 pounds of carbon is produced. So we were able to tell folks what sort of environmental benefits they were having as they were walking out the door with their new to them clothes, which as a parent, as a person that likes to shop secondhand, it was a huge deal, because you don't think about that as you have a lot of competition in our society to go and buy new all the time. So we're working on incorporating this and calculating this with our checkouts. And we've been able to reflect on this a lot more recently, working it into My Turn. They're making some real leaps and bounds there to make it transactional and build it in. And really, we can bring this into all of our work when it comes to repair, recycling. That's just another way to have people, again, engage and think about how they are consuming. And here is another example of how that is translated. So the EPA has a really great tool called the WARM tool where you can plug in. This might be too tiny for anybody that you can really see, but you can actually plug in a total carbon amount and they will calculate for you. I'm going to make this bigger so I can at least read it. How much gasoline is consumed in equal to what you are plugging in as carbon. And that's how we got the calculation for the types of trips that folks could take. So if you had, say, a 5-pound bag of clothes that you got new to you instead of buying new, you could probably almost feel your way to Olympia. And that was a great conversation starter for people to understand how their consumption habits can be very much a tangible impact on the environment. And these are the 3 databases that the Edinburgh Library actually used to compile their calculations that you saw on the previous slide. So the UK is unfortunately very much ahead of us on a lot of these calculations and a lot of this science, which is great. I'm excited to talk to Xenia more about what they've been able to work on as well, because that's just another level of conversation. But and there is some work around this at like UW right now, mostly centered around construction materials and that type of carbon emission and avoidance. So the last thing I wanted to show you was this. Oh, we're about to be kicked out. We can't consume our way out of a consumption problem. So engagement, we calculate how many people that we do it and are able to engage with. And that's a great way to show the community impact, have that conversation. That was actually the biggest takeaway that occurred to me as we were talking about the urban rural sort of dynamics, because we have a conversation urbanly that habits and changing consumption patterns has to be a very conscious, almost counterintuitive effort. And it's different challenges, just in kind of, or it's the same challenges, just in different kind of suits when you have all these different groups working together. But thank you guys. Yeah, that's all I have for you today, but thanks for listening.
Thanks, Amanda. Xenia, will it automatically kick us back into the main room?
So I will click the button now and we'll have 2 minutes for questions.
Okay, perfect. I don't think there's any questions in the thing. I wanted to quickly ask, what did I write down? I wrote down something. Oh, hey, Xenia, do you know, you said that it was 31% is minority and women owned. Do you know how that compares to the like bigger corporate, you know, like, do you know what that number is?
Very good question. No, we don't. And as you can understand, the folks who participated in that questionnaire, they're like minority owned and small businesses. So no, we don't have the data. The data that we acquired does give us some information on the leadership, but the limitation is that we cannot really trust that information, unfortunately. We learned from experience that the data that is being acquired, so that platform, the Dun & Bradstreet Corporation, they are also gaining the information using artificial intelligence. And we learned that some of the businesses that actually they're listing, they're out of business. So we cannot really trust the data they give us. To answer your question, unfortunately not. We cannot assess that.
I was just curious if it was higher within the reuse section.
That is possible.
All right, people, we've got 40 seconds for one more question.
And again, our report will be available early next year. So you'll have the numbers that we'll put together, and we will dissect that by repair separately, reuse in terms of resale of used goods. So we'll try to also make data available and dissect it in different with different diagonals.
Excellent. Well, as a fellow data nerd, I'm super excited about both of your presentations. So thank you to Xenia, thank you to Amanda, and